All right, tell me if my audio is off. Okay, so this is the full set review for Duskmorn. Today we're going to be covering the overview of the set, the introduction, all of the multicolored and colorless commons and uncommons, all of the white commons and uncommons. I'll be going a little bit fast. This is also the only content that I make specifically for the purposes of recording for YouTube. So if you have questions, please ask them, but I will be answering them between slides. And I do have a slide for every point that I want to cover. I'll be going kind of fast at the beginning, but don't worry, most of the points that I make will play out and start to make sense contextually as we go through the rest of the cards. So instead of using the traditional review system that other streamers or content creators use, I use the Scuffle review system. And this is meant to be a guide for your pick order, for getting you through the pack, for navigating your draft. Everything will have a number, like an average number, on a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 is a card that you should never play. A 2 is a card you should do your best not to play. A 3 is a card that is replaceable. A 4 is solid. You'll have some, don't worry about it. 5 is a strong card. A 6 is a card you will always play in a given color or deck. A 7 is a card that pulls you into the deck. If you see that or get past that, you're going to move into there. An 8 is a card that you will work to play. Maybe you'll splash it or you'll make your deck a little worse to accommodate it. A 9 is a card that you're doing this thing now. When you see it, you won't see very many 9s, and they're usually going to be rares. And a 10 is a card you will always play. There are very few 10s. I've only given out a couple 10s in the past few years. In addition to that average number is going to get you started. But I also give every card a floor, that's the worst a card will be, a ceiling, the best the card will be, and then an amount of effort it takes you to bridge that gap, the difficulty required to bring a card to its ceiling or above its floor. So that includes like deck building requirements, situational cards, cards that you should build around. And your job as a drafter is always going to be to try to put your cards together in such a combination that all those numbers are as high as possible. I will be I'll be taking questions between slides. Please ask them if you have any. Either I'm right and I will convince you and you'll be a better drafter, or you will be right and we will all learn something new collectively. Hi, Spoon. Hi, Rosalie. All right, so this is the roadmap of what we're going to look at today. We're mostly going to be focusing on the commons and uncommons for this because that's what you'll see most often. But if cards require rares or have specific rares that they work with, I will point them out. This is what we're doing today. First, this is going to be my favorite card. I always like to pick a card that I will always do my best to play, and Abhorrent Oculus is a fun one. We're going to talk about the GE scale, that is the graveyard to enchantment scale that Duskmorn uses. We'll go through some of the mechanics, and then other of the mechanics, the narrower ones, we'll talk about with their signpost uncommons. Those are the uncommons that are 2 colors exactly in Duskmorn that demonstrate what each set is about. Then we're going to go over all the stats of the set, then the general shape of the format, and then the multicolored and colorless cards, and we'll also do white a little bit separately. Did you have questions about the cards? You cannot have my bank account number. Good question, though. All right, so Duskmorn colors, rather than be like a web of interconnected colors or bands of 3, my dog's trying to unplug my headphones. Duskmorn colors are on a scale from green to blue that covers graveyards to enchantments. So green has graveyards. Green cares about graveyards, your own graveyard, and has no cards that care about enchantments. Blue has no cards that care about graveyards, but a lot of cards that care about enchantments. And there's a general scale from green to blue across that. Green blue as a color combination. Also, they use the outlying mechanic, which is Manifest Dread, which we'll talk about shortly. There's a new card type in Duskmorn called Rooms. It is a subtype of enchantments, and it's awesome. I really like it. So the way Rooms work is you can cast either half. You can either cast Glassworks, 3 mana, deal 4 damage, or you can cast Shattered Yard, 5 mana at the beginning of your end step. It deals 1 damage to each opponent. Neither of these cards are quite good enough alone, but it's a split card. It's a split card where you can cast either half and later pay the fuse cost, cast the other half of this card. Um, Eerie is an enchantment or is a keyword that triggers whenever an enchantment you control enters or when you unlock a room fully. So when I cast the first half of Glassworks, I pay the 3 mana, it does the thing, and it comes in unlocked, but this half is locked. And then Eerie will also trigger when I pay the cost up here to unlock it. There are 13 total rooms at common or uncommon. Red and blue both have 3, as well as one hybrid is blue on one half and red on the other. And then there's 2 each in green, black, and white. There are 0 green cards with Eerie, but all the other colors have them. There are 0 blue cards with Delirium, and white doesn't have Delirium, but has things similar. And Delirium says, as long as you have 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, something happens. So Patrick BC is a great example of that. It's a 1 mana 3/3 that doesn't do anything until you mate your Delirium. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill a card. So the general categories of Delirium cards are cards that require Delirium to be functional. Patrick BC is a good like a lot of cards. If you don't have Delirium, you're going to feel very embarrassed running that card or taking that card. There are cards that don't require Delirium but get a sizable bonus from it, and then there are cards that grow with Delirium. Patchwork BC is a great example of that. Like 1 mana at the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card is fine in a lot of green decks, and you can wait until it has the Delirium, and it gets better when it does. Green has a lot of cards that get better Delirium with Delirium later. But we'll be evaluating the cards with Delirium based on whether it's good until Delirium, doesn't work without Delirium, or works well whether you have Delirium or not. Card types, what this all adds up to is that your card types matter a lot. So being an artifact and a creature is 2, it's half your Delirium. So it ends up being pretty good. Enchantments matter because they trigger your Eerie, but they also matter for Delirium. So types matter a lot. You're going to find artifact creatures and enchantment creatures in this set. The other new mechanic we'll be looking at, Delirium's a returning mechanic, Eerie is a new one, even though it's a change on Constellation, is Manifest Dread. So when you Manifest Dread, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one face down, it's a 2/2 creature, the other goes into your graveyard. That means that all Manifest inherently helps Delirium or graveyard strategies. And you're more likely to have a creature. You can turn a face-down creature face-up for its mana cost if you manifested it that way, like through the Manifest Dread. So, if this were just put the top card, like Manifest is an old mechanic, you just put a face-down card into play, it's a 2/2, and you were hoping it's a creature. The fact that you get to look at 2 and choose one means it's a lot more likely that you'll hit a creature that can be turned face-up. And the card that goes into your graveyard is relevant to a lot of different decks. There's 23 total cards at common and uncommon that manifest Dread, and they're found in all the colors, but blue and green are the best at both manifesting the cards and using them. So Growing Dread here, whenever you turn a permanent face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's a pretty minor bonus, but just manifesting Dread for 2 mana is often going to be good enough, because you get to put a card of your choice into your graveyard for Delirium, and you are more likely to be able to turn that card face up later. And in the case of Growing Dread, it is also an enchantment with Flash, which triggers Eerie effects at Flash, but we'll talk about that more soon. The cards that let your opponent manifest generally are very weak. So there's a few Unwanted Remake, and there's a blue counterspell that manifests Dreads for your opponent. Like, you have to be really careful with those because you give your opponent 2/2s. There's so many cards that manifest Dread that it ends up being a baseline for a lot of stats on creatures. All creatures with 2 that are 2/3s are a little bit better because of the number of 2/2 manifest creatures. And the fact that it always puts cards into the graveyard is very relevant. All right, checking the chat. So Lion, this is a really good question. So back in Neon Dynasty, cards were generally on an artifact to enchantment scale. The difference between this and Neon Dynasty is that they did a better job of closing the ends again. So like blue and green manifesting dread, um, they did a good job of, like, the blue green cards tend to be enchantments that affect the graveyard. They just do both in halves. So your blue green decks will kind of lean one way or the other, but it's not quite like Neon Dynasty where red white was totally unplayable. Like red white in Neon Dynasty, white was enchantments, red was artifacts. Those two colors didn't cross over at all. In this set, they cross over in a unique way that ends up being very powerful. Counterspell, give opponent a bear is very bad, Elspoon. But it counters any spell and you get a 3/2 as well. It's closer to Arcane Denial than Counterspell. It's very interesting. All right. There's also other mechanics that we only see at rare, like Impending. We're not going to worry too much about those. Stats. There are 107 creatures in the set, 45 enchantments, 18 of which are also creatures. That's very relevant for stuff like Delirium. There's only 14 creatures with flying. That's really low. There's only 4 creatures with reach. That's really low. There's only 5 combat tricks. That is incredibly low. That might be the lowest we've ever had in a set in terms of cards that affect combat and instant speed. There for fixing, there's 5 commons with land cycling, 1 in each color. All creatures. There are 10 common dual lands. They come into play tapped, and they're untapped unless a player has 13 life or less. And then there are 3 colorless sources of fixing, Terramorphic Expanse, and 2 uncommon artifacts. For toughnesses, there are 18 creatures with 1 toughness, 27 creatures with 2 toughness, 21 creatures with 3 toughness, 21 creatures with 4 toughness, 9 creatures with 5 toughness, 2 creatures with 6 toughness, 2 with 7 toughness, and there's only 1 9 toughness creature. That's a typo. So you'll notice this is something that we've seen more in recent sets. It was a little weird in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but since then we've seen much more standardization in toughness. Like, it's much more even for 1, 2, 3, and 4 toughness creatures. All of that means that the 1 removal spell in the set, or there's 2 removal spells in the set, but one's a sweeper, that deal 1 damage, kill 17% of creatures. The 3 spells that deal 2 damage to a creature or give -2/-2 kill 45% of creatures. The 3 damage removal spells kill 65% of creatures, a little lower than normal, but not by much. The 2 4 damage removal spells kill 86% of creatures. The 2 5 damage removal spells kill 95% of creatures, and the 1 6 damage removal spell kills 97% of creatures. All of these also kill anything that was manifested through Manifest Dread, which there's quite a lot of those, but they all have the ability to be turned face up to survive those spells, so you have to be a little careful. This is a lot more size-based removal than we usually see. In addition to that, there are 7 pieces of unconditional removal, 3 auras that kill a creature effectively, / one of them is not an aura's enchantment. There's 2 bites, but there's 0 cards that fight. There are 2 control magic or threatening effects, and I'm putting those together because you're very likely to sack the creature when you take the creature. There are 3 cards that do tapping. There are 2 bounce spells. There's 1 tuck. That means you put it on the top or bottom or shuffle it in. There are 12 creatures that kill creatures, which is very high, but they all require a reasonable amount of work to do so. There are 5 disenchants. Really, we care about enchantments, but most of them kill artifacts as well. And then there's 2 sweepers that uncommon. One of them gives creatures -1/-1. One of them is Pyroclasm, deals 2 damage to each creature. Both of those, Pyroclasm a lot more so, are things you have to be aware of while you're playing this set. Don't die because your opponent casts a 2 mana removal spell. You can lose all your creatures at once. One of the 1 damage removal, there's another 1 damage removal that is a 1 mana creature, and then a 2 damage removal that is a 6 mana creature. We will talk about both of those extensively when we get there. Yes, this is true. Yes, manifests are in the Pyroclasm set. This is going to be a set that really rewards planning and guessing what your opponent might have. If your opponent is playing like they have Pyroclasm, not giving up 2 creatures to it is going to be huge for you. All right. Shape of the format. So, this is an engine set. We've talked a little, sometimes we have some synergy sets. We've had some puzzle sets recently. This is an engine set. That means you'll need to know a few things including how you're setting up your engine. So you want to know who's the beatdown. Are you trying to make the game go longer, or are they? There's so many different mana sinks in this. So there's so many ways to spend your mana. Sometimes it's just cast the giant creatures that you were reanimating. Sometimes it's unlocking a room. Sometimes you're just trying to set up a specific course of events with Delirium, or returning things like Fear of Infinity. Like, mana sinks just happen in this set. You don't need to put effort into getting your mana sinks, which means that you need to know who will win if this game goes on. And you're going to have to spend time figuring that out the whole time. In addition to that, combat matters more than just for damage. Like, if your opponent attacks you with a Fear of Infinity and you block it or spend a kill spell on it, then you just put an enchantment and a creature into their graveyard. Like, that might matter for their follow-up play. You might need to take that damage so that they don't have Delirium for that turn. The other mechanic, which we will talk about a lot very shortly, is the green-white mechanic of survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if blank is tapped, do a thing. You might need to block badly or risk a combat trick to stop your opponent from just drawing a card because they attack, or growing a creature, or returning something to play because they attack. A lot of the survival triggers are worth a whole card on their own, which means that you have to think about how you're attacking and how you're blocking. Knowing who the beatdown is and when you have to hold things back to block matters a lot. You will have to race for your engine. Like, whoever does the thing faster will win. This is not an aggressive set. This is not a set where your opponent will kill you very quickly by attacking. But it's going to feel that way when your opponent plays a 2-mana survival creature and you play and a 3-mana survival creature, and then you don't have answers for those creatures. Those creatures will take over the game if you can't block them or stop them. So it's a little bit like Bloomburrow in that you're not going to lose or win fast, but the things that happen that cause you to lose or win will happen in the early turns. Like, you can't let Glimmerseeker attack you uncontested 3 times. You will lose that game. Or maybe you can because you have a better engine that you are setting up a little bit later. But like Survival, Delirium, Eerie, Reanimator, Black White's theme is Reanimator. These all take setup. They all take work to make happen. And doing that faster is a huge boon. If you hold your opponent off of Delirium for 2 key turns, that might be the difference in a win or a loss. If you can hold your opponent off of Delirium while you're using your survival triggers or putting out your Eerie creatures so that you can hold your enchantments, that's going to make a huge difference. And so we'll talk about this soon, but if you have an enchantment that exiles target creature until it leaves play, buying time and finding the right time to play that, maybe after you have your Eerie creatures in play, is going to represent a lot of value that you might need. And lastly, if your deck needs time, you're going to have to buy it. You have to spend resources in your picks and in your gameplay to buy time if you need it. So you have to know how much time you need from the beginning. And you have to think about how much time you need over the course of your draft. All right, moving on to the cards. Do we have any questions about this? We'll talk about Graveyard Hate as we get there, Haiku. There is a black leyline in this set. It's actually main deckable. Not if you can't ever cast it, and not if you have no looting, but like, it does stop a lot of sets. Yes, so we are going to talk a lot about that, Spoon. There is no way at common or uncommon. So Survival says the beginning of your second main phase, if Glimmerseeker is tapped, draw a card. There are enablers. There's nothing so good as a vehicle or a saddle creature to tap them every turn, but there are ways that it's worth putting effort into tapping them. It's really cool. All right, so Rosalie, watching this whole thing gives a pretty significant advantage. That's why I tend to place pretty high mythic in the early times of the set. I don't know what that means, Haiku. I haven't looked at the rares. Yes, there are rare vehicles, and I think they might all be busted because of survival. Like, I haven't looked at all the rares and mythics yet. I always try and process these at the common and uncommon level first. All right, up first we have blue-red runes. This is an archetype that is it's kind of at odds with itself in a lot of ways. So up first we have Intruding Soul Rager. It sacrifices room, deals two damage to each opponent, draws a card. A lot of the rooms do their thing when they come into play. Like maybe you paid 3 mana to kill a creature, or maybe you paid 1 mana to bounce a creature. Then you're pretty happy to eat the room. But a lot of the rooms care about how many rooms you have. So that puts Intruding Soul Rager kind of at odds with other rooms. Being a 2-mana 2/2 is kind of a liability in this set because of Manifest Dread. It's hard to attack with the 2-mana 2/2 even when it has Vigilance because your opponent can Manifest Dread at instant speed. So your 2-mana 2/2s can't be the linchpin of your deck. That being said, I gave it a 4 because it's still a pretty efficient body. It's usually going to play closer to that floor of a 3, but it only has to eat a couple rooms over the course of the game for it to be good. And there's a lot you can do with it in other colors. So that's why that ceiling is a 7, that effort value is high. Like if you are a teamer deck that can recur your enchantments pretty well. White is a little bit better at it, but like if you can recur your enchantments and keep using the rooms, it gets a little bit stronger. And it's not like Bloomburrow. In Bloomburrow, if you wanted to be a Lizards deck, you would take all the lizards and you would be a Lizards deck that functions. If you want to be a blue-red rooms deck, you can't just take all the rooms. You need to have the right rooms, and you have to be conscious about how you're using the rooms. The Soul Rager is still going to always go into your room deck, but it's not going to be good in every room deck. It's good in an aggressive, tempo-oriented room deck where you're playing. There's a blue room that's 1 mana, bounce a creature. You're happy to bounce a creature, draw a card, deal 2 damage, and then attack. You're happy to pay 3 mana to deal 4 damage, eat the room, draw a card, attack, but you're not happy to play this one, the Smoky Lounge. You don't want to eat this room, not usually. This is a pure rooms card. It's very bad if you're not a rooms deck. It's really good if you're a blue-red rooms deck. So it's a lot to parse, but basically it's 3 mana to make 2 red mana that you can use to unlock or play a room every turn. That's really good in a rooms deck. The Misty Salon is a 4 mana 1/1 if you cast it, or a 4 mana 2/2 if you unlock it, because if you cast this blue half, then it's only going to be a 1/1 because it's the only unlocked door. But if you play a 3 mana Smoky Lounge, then it's only 2 mana to unlock the Misty Salon next turn, and it's going to make a 2/2. So the nice thing about this card is you can play it down on turn 3 and then unlock it like 10 turns later when you have a bunch of rooms. If you have a second Smoky Lounge in your hand, well, then on the next turn, you can pay 1 mana for that Smoky Lounge. And then it's only 1 mana to unlock the first Misty Salon and 1 mana to unlock the second Misty Salon, and you'll have a 3/3 and a 4/4 with flying. Like, it's only good in the rooms deck, and it's really good in the rooms deck. You can cash you can start cashing the rooms in later with the Soul Rager, but when you're playing the rooms deck, you're going to have to be careful don't build a deck that risks drawing your cards in the wrong order. So yeah, these both have 4s, but this is a 4 with a floor of 3, ceiling of 7. This is a floor with a floor of 1, ceiling of 8. They're both fine, great in the rooms deck, weak elsewhere, hard to splash. Yeah, so you have to have rooms online when you play the Misty Salon, but like you can just leave the Smoky Lounge in play. Yeah, like it's really good in the rooms deck. 2 mana is a lot every turn. On the red-white, so it's red-white weenies. It cares about creatures with power 2 or less. So important to note about this set, there's very few anthems. There's very few cards that say creatures you control get +1 and +1. There isn't any card, there's no heroic charge. Creatures you control get +2/+1 or +2/0. There are a few ways to grow your creatures, but they're kind of a premium. So this isn't something that you can do for free. This isn't a set where putting 5 tokens into play is automatically good. You have to have those anthems first. But Arabelle is a good card on its own. It's a good body. If this is a 2 mana 1/3 that attacks for 1 and drains them 1, they lose one, you gain one. Like, that's an agate blade assassin, right? That's fine. But if you can play out a bunch of bodies, it starts being good fast. And it doesn't get blocked by a manifest dread creature at instant speed. Like, your opponent can't put down a 2/2 and kill this. They can put down a 2/2 and wall it, so they're only taking one. Arabella is very strong in a red-white deck and strong when you build around her, but you can't have only power 2 or less creatures. Very cool card, though. It's not actually that aggressive this time, Haiku. So Haiku is lamenting the fact that Boros just tends to be the aggressive deck. It's Boros weenies, but there's no inspired charge at the end of that. There's no real burn spells. There's a lot of cards that say when a creature with power 2 less comes into play, draw a card. Like, you can use these for value. It's kind of cool. Yes, they have a lot of artifact creatures that are good for Delirium. Delirium is the red-green theme. So artifact creatures being a red-white thing ends up feeding Delirium pretty well. The other red-white signpost uncommon, Midnight Mayhem. This one I had to revise a lot, because in any other set, 4 mana for 3 creatures with Menace, Lifelink, and Haste would be insane. It's like what Haiku was saying. Any other red-white Boros go-wide deck, this card would be ridiculous. In this set, chances are your opponent's going to block one of the gremlins, and you're going to punch through for 2. But you need to put effort into getting more out of this card. Like, you need to have the anthems, and I think they're somewhat rare. You need to have cards like Arabella, but it's not like Arabella can stack. She's legendary. Like, you need to do more with your creatures. And there's ways to do that, but it's not free. You can't run this in a vacuum for free. But if you can, put out 3 1/1s with Menace, Lifelink, and Haste, and then grow them all, then this gets a lot better. I think it's got a pretty good splash potential in a red-black. I think I'll be splashing this one in red-black quite often, because that red-black is really good at using 3 bodies. Midnight Mayhem is better with some of the Boros cards that draw you cards or let you generate value. But even then, a lot of those cards say this ability triggers only once each turn. So it's fine, and it's not amazing. All right, green-white survival. So survival is this creature, if it survived to main phase 2, then you get an effect. So baseball bat ends up being very difficult to equip, but that's fine because it attaches. Tapping a target creature is really good in this set, because if your opponent has a 1/3/3 in play and you have 1/3/3 in play, or 1/2/2 in play, then your baseball bat equips to the creature, you attack it, you punch through for 3 damage. You tap their creature. If your opponent has 2/3/3s in play, and you have a 3/3 with survival and a 2/2, then you can attack your 3/3 and tap your own survival creature in order to trigger it. This is a very good way to do that. In the late game, you can then toss this around. Survival doesn't end up being... You're not aggressively killing them with a survival deck as much as you are aggressively being aggressive. Like, you want the attacks because you want the value from your survival creatures. You don't necessarily want the attacks because you want them dead. And your opponent might be very good at surviving those. But the baseball bat is flexible and strong. If they kill the creature you attach it to, it's very annoying. Because 3 is a lot for this effect. But it's still going to end up being worth in the late game. Yes! That's a pretty good thing. Survival is about attacking to win. And that's weird and unintuitive. But you're going to have a ton of huge life swings in this format. Like, if you're attacking to kill and trying to race your opponent, then Arabella is really tough to race because they're gaining 5 life on that attack. So attacking to win is always plan A, but attacking for value is a really good plan B that you will end up doing a lot. So here's a good example. Shrewd Storyteller. Like, 3 mana 3/3 is okay. If this becomes a 3 mana 4/4 and then a 3 mana 5/5 and then 3 mana 6/6, it's really good. And it puts the counter on any creature, so it lets you work with other survival creatures. But if your opponent has 5/5s in play, you might sacrifice a creature to get your... Or if your opponent has 4/4s in play, you might sacrifice a creature to get your Shrewd Storyteller a little bit bigger. Like, this counter can be worth a whole card, and when that happens, you need ways to make it happen. Green and white both have a lot of enablers, and we'll talk about a lot of the white enablers today. But baseball bat's a good one. I gave it a 6 with a ceiling of 6, and I think it'll usually play near that ceiling of 6 in the green-white deck. Shrewd Storyteller is a little more work to get going. You need actual combat tricks and enablers for it to be that ceiling of a 7, that powerful card. But it's not a problem if you have to play it as a 3-mana 3/3 that wins up when it's unchecked. This is a good example of why you need to check. Like, you can't skip your 3-drop when your opponent's playing a 3-mana 3/3, because once it grows a few times, you're not catching up. All right, so red green is aggressive delirium. It has the most cards that are fine without delirium, but gain some bonus as the game goes on. So red green, fight a creature, is fine. Like, it's a reasonable removal spell. It's a 4. It's not something you want to play. I'm gonna go ahead and lower that floor. But like, you don't want to play this if you don't have access to delirium. But if you get to put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control, and then fight, this is a great card. Like, bite is fine. Grow bite is great. Red green is gonna be a fun delirium. But like, you might have a disaster where your opponent exiles a card from your graveyard in response to you playing the BC beatdown, and then you lose your delirium. That can be bad. The other red green signpost uncommon is Wildfire Wicker Folk. So a 2-mana 3/2 with haste is okay. It's weaker in this set than it would be in other sets. So a 2-mana 3/2 and haste in other sets might be a 4 at a floor. Here, because your opponent can manifest dread so consistently and is likely to want that card in their graveyard anyway, being a 3/2 is a huge liability. But attacking for 3 on turn 2 on the play is a lot of damage, and then waiting until you're a 4/3 with trample is incredibly powerful. So that ceiling of a 6 is if you're pretty good at making delirium happen. That floor of a 3 is if you're not. Yeah, so delirium is a state of being if you have 4 or more card types. And the card types are enchantment, artifact, creature, land, instant, sorcery, kindred, planeswalker. What are we missing? Did we get them all? No, I think there's 9 types. But yeah, so in this set, generally speaking, you should assume that creatures will be in your graveyard and that instants and sorceries. Battle! Thank you, D-Take. Creatures, instants, sorceries, those are pretty easy. And in a lot of sets where delirium has been a mechanic in the past, we've struggled with that last one. But this is a set full of artifact creatures and enchantment creatures, which makes it a lot easier to get delirium. So you should assume delirium is inevitable, but you can take steps to get to delirium faster. And we'll see a lot of the cards that make that happen. So like Manifest Dread puts a card into the graveyard. Makes delirium a little easier to get. So red-green is aggro delirium. Green-black is grindy delirium. So Brood Spinner doesn't have delirium on its own, but a 2-mana 2/3 that surveils 2, like, you can get delirium. You can have 4 types in your graveyard just from putting 2 cards into your graveyard. But this card is absurd in this format. Like, a 2-mana 2/3 with reach in a set when there's just not enough creatures with reach, that's very good. I would play a 2-mana 2/3 with reach. I would play a 2-mana 2/3 with Surveil 2 and no other abilities. I would play a 2-mana 2/3 with reach and no other abilities. I would play a 2-mana 2/3 with just this bottom ability. Generally speaking, this is not, you're not going to use that bottom ability too often, but sometimes you'll draw it on turn 8. You'll set up your next 2 draws, and then you'll make 5 flying insects. It makes tokens with flying. Like, 3 to 5 is not unreasonable. So it's not strictly delirium, it's card types, which is honorary delirium. But yes, this card is incredibly good in this format. I gave it a 7 with a ceiling of a 7, and is usually going to play near that ceiling of a 7. That floor of a 5, that's if you aren't a delirium deck or you don't care about your graveyard. If you're just playing this because you are a 2-mana 2/3 with reach because that sets up your draws, you're fine. Yes, you can do that at instant speed. You can block with this card, make 5 1/1 flyers and attack your opponent for 5 in the air. You can make 5 1/1 flyers and block everything your opponent plays. This card is silly. I think I only gave out 2 7s among the multicolored cards. This is one of them. Very powerful magic card. If you get past these, you should move into black green. Yeah. The other green-black card, Drag to the Roots, not a lot to say about it. It's a very good removal spell. This is a good, strong removal spell at 4 mana. This is a busted in half removal spell at 2 mana, and I'm assuming that you can play this for 2 mana. Killing any non-land permanent for 2 mana is a little absurd. But you can't really do it on turn 2. Like, this is a late game card. Like, maybe you're playing this in another spell on turn 6, which is why it's not a 7. But it's usually going to play near the ceiling of a 6. Disturbing Myth, really cool card. Like, compared to the other multicolored cards, this one both stacks really well. If I have 5 copies of this card, I'm playing 5 copies of this card, and with nothing else, this card is pretty weak. 2 mana to sacrifice a creature or enchantment to draw 2 cards is bad. 2 mana to sacrifice a creature or enchantment to draw 2 cards, and Manifest Dread is really good. So Disturbing Mirth is a powerful card in this format because if you enable it, if you're sacrificing something to draw those 2 cards, chances are you're also drawing something to sacrifice Disturbing Mirth. Like, this is likely to be more than a 2-for-1 in a black-red deck, but like, I'm not going to splash it. I'm not going to be this deck just because I see this card, but if I am this deck, I want to pick up every copy of this card that I see, and I'm hoping to table them. Yes, this is a Hellraiser reference. This is a cool one. Yeah, this is a very powerful card in Black-Red Sacrifice. Oh, so Black-Red, the archetype is Sacrifice. You sacrifice creatures, you sacrifice enchantments. Cards care about the number of things that have been sacrificed, and cards want to die a lot of the time. But yes, Disturbing Mirth is a cool card. It works really well with the other Black-Red Signpost uncommon, Sawblade Skin Ramper. This card is ridiculous. It's a 3-mana, 3/2 menace. Very good. You can sacrifice any creature enchantment to put a counter on it. You can do that as many times as you can pay the mana. You can sacrifice your Disturbing Mirth to Manifest Dread and then do it again. At the beginning of your end step, if you sacrifice 1 or more permanents this turn, it deals that much damage to any target. That means that this is 2 mana, put a counter on Sawblade Skin Ripper, ping something. 4 mana, put 2 counters on Sawblade Skin Ripper, shoot something for 2. Like, in the black-red deck, this is absurdly powerful, and I might end up splashing it elsewhere. It lets you set up some silly, very powerful turns. It enables all of the threat. There's only a couple threatens, but it enables the threatens in the set. Like, you get to grab a creature, eat the creature, attack for 4 with menace, shoot the other creature. This one's really good. Haiku, I'm not letting you complain when archetypes are returning, unless you also get excited for the archetypes that are new. All right, up next, Fear of Infinity. This one I came back to a lot. So, a 3-mana 2/2 flying lifelink that can't block would be insane on its own in any other format. Returning it from your graveyard to your hand is really good. There are cards that loot. You'll draw and discard this, and then you'll play an enchantment and pick it up. The thing is, your 3-drop not being able to block is a problem in a lot of matchups. So I still gave it a 5 with a floor of a 4, but like, this would be an 8 on average in other sets. In this one, it's a value machine that keeps you alive as long as you don't have to block. It's better if you have other pieces of removal or can grow it, which is why I gave it this 3-color note. You want to make this a little bit bigger. You want to make this a little... you want to find an engine. This is an engine piece. You want to find cards that combo with it. It's really good with those. That's why I gave it a ceiling of an 8. You can make this into an 8, but you'll have to put in the work. You can't just pick it up and have it work like it would in other sets. So gaining 2 life and dealing 2 damage every turn is not inherently good enough in this set, Spoon. It's a really good point. Like, your opponent is not likely to be able to block this for free, but the best cards do block it for free. You really want to... 1 power grows this. 2 power takes it out of the range of Scorching Dragonfire, which is a premier red common that exiles a creature. Like, it is answerable. It is powerful, but it's not a catch-all, and it is answerable. It's still really good. I gave it a 5, but I'm just pointing out that in other sets, this would be an 8 all the time. It's just, this is a set with answers for it. It's cool. It's great design. Oh, that is cool, Haiku. So when victims of the fears are the faces, and I guess the more they do, the more powerful it is. Yes, yeah, it's work. I want you to play with this card. I don't want you to think that you can just put this card into your deck. That's all I'm saying. Yes, this combos with something cool in literally every other color. Um, there is something awesome you can do with Fear of Infinity in any 3-color combination. Up next, we have Skull Snap Nuisance. This card was a lot more likely to play near its ceiling. It's a lot easier to use. If you get to surveil with it a few times, you're happy. If you get to, but a 1/4 body, like 4 toughness is awesome on a 2-drop. It blocks every other 2-drop. There's only one creature with Death Touch. And it's usually going to play near that ceiling of a 6. What's up, Ben? How you doing? Oh, are you putting your hand up because you have a question, or are you just saying hello? Ooh, needed that. Yeah, so this is a cool one. Good Eerie card. The blue-black is like Eerie control. So going back to that scale of graveyard to enchantment, blue-black is Eerie control. Black's got, and they care about the graveyard. The blue-black signpost uncommons care about the graveyard, but they care more about enchantments. And the green-white is survival. It's kind of an outlier because these are far away on the scale. And the red-blue cares about enchantments, but in a weird way. I like it. I like the scale, and I'm standing by it for the duration of this review. All right, up next, Azorius. So blue-white is Eerie. It's like Eerie tempo. Really, it's just play creatures and enchantments. It's mostly creatures that feed or benefit from enchantments. Compared to blue-black, which is a little more controlling, things that generate value. The blue-white ones, you're trying to get your opponent dead with your Eerie's. So Gremlin Tamer is a 2-mana 2/2 with Eerie and make a 1/1. Awesome. Like, just powerful card. You need a lot of enchantments. It doesn't do anything on its own. But these cards pull some value out of the rooms and cards that are otherwise difficult to use effectively. So we'll look at some of the white rooms and it'll be a little more obvious. But like the blue 1-mana unsummon room is a lot better with the Gremlin Tamer because you're also getting a 1/1 out of it. Just a powerful card. That floor of a 4 is if you have a few enchantments. That ceiling of 7 is if you have a lot of enchantments, including a few of the enchantments that we're going to look at today. Enchantments that protect your creatures become really important in blue-white. And then we've also got Inquisitive Glimmer. Most of the value of this card is that it is a 2-mana 2/3. Being an enchantment is a bit of a liability on more expensive cards, but on the cheaper... Hi, Rebel. But on the cheaper cards, being an enchantment is not like is a good thing. So we saw something similar in Theros Beyond Death. 7 mana for an enchantment creature that dies to your opponent's 2-mana disenchant felt awful. But a 2-mana 2/3 that dies to your opponent's disenchant, that would die anyway to a cheap removal spell, but it has 2 types for Delirium. And this is also a very efficient body that ramps you for 4-mana enchantments. Rooms that cost 4 mana are a little bit better in blue-white. You can also play it and get the mana value later if you have some rooms at play. Up next, we've got the blue-green uncommons. The blue-green uncommons are a doozy. All right, Growing Dread. 2 mana, Manifest Dread is good. 2 mana Manifest Dread is good enough in this set, in the right deck. They also put it on an enchantment with Flash that grows cards that get turned face up. You shouldn't count on this too much. I'd be surprised if even the dedicated Manifest deck turned a permanent face up more than once or twice in a game. But 2 mana to trigger 1 Eerie, put a card into your graveyard, make a 2/2, and put a counter on another creature is a great rate. That floor of a 4 is if all you're doing is manifesting Dread. It's usually going to play a little bit better, especially in blue-green specifically. Blue-green is great at pulling value out of manifesting Dread. It's very bad at pulling value out of Eerie triggers, green especially, but blue has a few cards that make it work. Most of the blue Eerie triggers are not worth a card. Like, Making a 1/1 for each Eerie trigger is really powerful, but most of the blue Eerie triggers are like mill a card or grow for a turn. Like it's worth a fraction of a card, and those do add up. Um, but it's tough to get the full value of this being an enchantment with flash uh, out of it. You're just going to be happy with your 2 mana 2/2 that mills a card and puts a counter things on something later and blocks. 1/1s are really tough to attack with in this set because your opponent can make a 2/2 at instant speed so easily. So I gave it a 5, floor 4, ceiling of 7, medium effort. The other blue signpost uncommon is ridiculous. I think it's to make up, like, this is what I was talking about where with Neon Dynasty, the samurai were not powerful enough to make up for closing that loop of the scale. I believe this bookworm is. A 2 mana 2/3 that loots for free every turn in a delirium set is fantastic. I would play this if it were a vanilla 2 mana 2/3. But a 2 mana 2/3 that loots to enable your delirium and feed your graveyard things for green is really very powerful. Every time you manifest Dread, it just draws you a card. If you manifest the bookworm and then flip it face up, it draws you a card. Like, this card is so pushed, it's very silly. So I do have it as the highest rated uncommon in the set as of right now. It's tied with a few other things. This one, Brood Spinner, and I think I have one white uncommon at the same rating. But yes, this card is really strong. You have to kill it when you're like, it's a little bit fragile is the only real downside, but it's so on rate. It's gonna be tough. Like, it's so tough to hold this up, like to hold up removal to kill this before your opponent gets value out of it. Like, you don't want to hold your Scorching Dragonfire up on turn 2. Very powerful card. Yes, it is a must-kill 2-drop. It is ridiculous. Okay, the black-white cards are super cool. So black-white has Reanimator, but this is the best job they've done of giving, like, this is the best job they've done of giving black-white Reanimator as a mechanic in a long time. Like, this is a 4-mana reanimation spell that only black-white can cast. You're not dumping this into your graveyard off of your random loot in the hopes that you can filter in this mana later. You are only playing this card in a black-white deck, and you are playing 2 major creatures from your graveyard with this spell. The black-white, as an archetype, has very good things to reanimate, like like our next card. But it's pretty easy to play with in black-white. You're not terribly upset if you only reanimate a 4-drop or a 5-drop, because you get to flash it back and do it again later. Really cool card. Very happy to have something like this in black-white. Because Dariel Rights, for instance, 5 mana bounce, return a creature from your graveyard to play, 4 mana to flash it back, return a creature from your graveyard to play. That was tough to get in Innistrad because my black-green deck would play that. My green-white deck would play that. Like, only black-white gets to play Ride of the Moth, and it's going to be very strong in this format, in black-white Reanimator. And then the other black-white signpost uncommon is a creature to reanimate. You want to avoid paying 7 mana for this, if at all possible. But even if your opponent kills this, it already drained them 2 and you drew a card. The floor of this card is going to be a 2-for-1 drain 2, gain 2. But it's a real threat that your opponent has to deal with. And you get to cheat it into play. Like, playing this on turn 4 means that your opponent, if they don't kill this, that you drew 2 cards and drain them 4. Yeah, it drains them 2 and draws a card when it comes in or attacks, which means that if you play this on turn 7, yeah, you'll draw a card and drain them, and then your opponent's going to kill it. But if you play this on turn 4, then you'll get to attack with it 2 times before they can kill it, and it will be worth a lot of cards. Like, the black-white reanimation deck is going to be really cool. Story-wise, I was having a little trouble, so there are things made of cloth that do the cleaning in this set. Is that how it works? Because these cloth things are in other artworks. But I'd like to know the story of that. At least the Razorkin are happy when they kill you. The walkers don't even notice. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean when this is an engine set. Like, you're trying to do your manifest thing or your eerie swarm thing before your opponent can do their reanimate thing. Like, you're racing in this format, but they're not going to feel you're racing your engine against their engine. It's not going to feel like racing in any other set. Fresno Nightcrawl. I don't know what that is. If you could post that in Discord, I'd love to see it. All right, that is the last of the multicolor cards. We have covered all of the archetypes. We always do that first so that we can talk about other things in relation to those archetypes. There's not a ton of artifacts and lands, so we're going to do those right now. I love the flavor of this card. It's not good, but it's really cool. All right, so 3 mana, 2/4 body is not great. Attacking for 6 one time is pretty cool. But this isn't a card you want to play on its own. This is only a card you want to play when you have specific combos and reasons to play it. There is a give a creature +1/+0 and double strike spell. There is a few ways to grant trample, and there's an archetype that cares about sacrificing a creature. There is an archetype that cares about having a card that is both an artifact and a creature dying on demand. Attacking the box is never going to be the card you want for any of those strategies, but having access to it late is going to feel better than not having it at all. Cool card with a place, but you're not going to take it very high. Thank you, Haiku. I'll take a look after this. All right. I gave it a 3, floor of 2, ceiling of 5. Sometimes you're going to need this card, and you don't have to feel bad about that. But like aggressive delirium decks, aggressive sacrifice decks, decks with specific combos won't be able to make use of the attack in the box. Bear Trap. 4 mana, deal 3 is a little bit weak, even though it's spread out across 2 turns. But it is an artifact for delirium, and it is removal that you will sometimes be able to pick up and sit on. It's fine. Don't be. It kills 65% of creatures. That's a lot. It's a reasonable combat trick. Like, there's low combat tricks in this set. But 4 mana, deal 3 at instant speed is almost good enough. Being an artifact matters for delirium. So based on the average toughness of commons and uncommons for this set, good question, Sarah. Thank you. 3 damage kills 65% of the common and uncommon creatures in this set, because 21 creatures have 3 toughness, 27 and 18. So 48, 58, 66 creatures. The Bear Trap kills 66 creatures out of the set at common or uncommon. You don't want this just for that. You want this when you want to kill a creature and want delirium. That's right, Spoon. That's a good way of putting it. Audi brand delirium. They're both artifacts that can go to the graveyard when you need them. Up next, Conductive Machete. I'm giving this one a revisit. So this one doesn't go to your graveyard, but this is a 4 mana 4/3 that leaves behind an equipment. That might be good enough. That might be good enough. Dirt Niv, thank you so much for the raid. Good to see ya. We're doing the set review right now. Hi, I'm Scuffle. I do mostly educational content. Right now we're doing the full draft set review for Duskmorn. All of the commons and uncommons. Today we went through. We're starting at the beginning of the artifact, so it's fine. So I have a review system of 1 to 10. I give everything a floor and a ceiling value, as well as an effort required to bridge that gap, with the idea that it's going to help you find the specific things. There are no commons that I know of that sack artifacts, Flutter Dev. Great question. Oh, thank you so much, Ernim. Appreciate that. So today we did my favorite card, the in Duskmorn. All the cards operate on a graveyard to enchantment scale. So green cares about graveyards, blue cares about enchantments, and it moves from caring about the graveyard to caring about enchantments along this scale. And then they close the circle with Manifest Dread from green to blue. So if you are interested in the set overview, you can go. I'm going to have this up on YouTube first thing in the morning. But these are all the stats, what kills what. This is the toughness sizes of all the commons and uncommons in the set. And this is how good removal is at different damages. Generally, this is an engine set, so you have to pay attention how quickly you're doing the engine. But if you have any questions, I will be taking all questions between slides, and please be sure to ask them because that is how we learn. So conductive machete, I gave it a 4. It's fine. It's usually going to be a 4-mana 4/3 that leaves things behind. Yes, that is a Hellraiser reference. The Disturbing Mirth. This is a cool card. All right, so there's no good way to sacrifice artifacts other than the artifacts that sacrifice themselves. That's why Attack in the Box and Bear Trap are both playable. But a 4-mana 4/3 that leaves something behind is fine. It's never going to be the best thing in your deck, but it's going to be fine. Up next, Found Footage. This is a 3-mana cantrip. Surveil 2 draw card is a pretty much instant Delirium enabler. Looking at your opponent's face-down creatures is useful, but not crazy. I'm giving this one a revisit as well, because in a lot, you have to set it up, right? Like, you have to build your deck so that Surveil 2 draw card gives you Delirium right away. But if you can put a land and an enchantment creature into your graveyard off that Surveil 2, then you paid 3 mana to turn Delirium on all at once. That's an artifact, an enchantment, and a creature, and a land all at once. Yes, but this is really only a Delirium card. I wouldn't play this outside of a deck that cares about Delirium. Which is why I gave it a 2 with a floor of 2. It's usually going to play closer to that floor. And that ceiling of 4 is in a dedicated Delirium deck. The thing is, most of the dedicated Delirium decks have cards that do this better. Right, that's right, then Sashmo. Like, it's not that this is not a solid card. It's that black and green and red all have a similar version of this effect, but better. Like, and it doesn't do the thing. So Surveil 2 draw card is fine. But because you're trying to get your engines online in a reasonable time frame, taking 2 turns off to do this is difficult, right? Like, it's red. So green and black are so good at putting Delirium on with a single card. Black has a version of this that is essentially the same thing, but gains 3 life. And green has a version of this that also can put a 9/9 into play for free without spending any mana. So it's solid but replaceable. You have better versions of this. Right. So I didn't give this a 2 because it's unplayable. I gave it a 2 because it's not a high pick priority. Oh, you haven't seen this card? All right, we're going to look at this because it's relevant to a lot of what we're talking about. That Duskmourn. Mill. No. Oh. It's called Say Its Name. It's a common. You mill 3 cards. It's not gonna work. Sorry. You. Why is it so difficult? Here we go. There we go. All right, mill 3 cards. You may return a creature land card from your graveyard to your hand. Like, this is a sorcery that puts the same number of cards. I'm really struggling to show you what this card does. All right, mill 3 cards. Then you may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. Exile this card and 2 other cards named Say Its Name from your graveyard. Search your graveyard, hand, and or library for a card named Altanach the Thrice Called and put it onto the battlefield. Did I spell that right? Altanach with a K. All right. 7 mana 9/9. 2 mana discard it, return and target land from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it becomes a target spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. So this is at common a way to mill 3 cards, and it does the same thing. Yes, Altanach is an uncommon, but you only need 1 copy. You need 3 copies of Say Its Name. But for the purposes of what we're talking about today, this is... Sorry, my slides are all messed up. This is the worst version of this card. Like, you will still play it to enable Delirium quickly, and because it's an artifact. But in terms of assembling your deck, you want to be milling cards like the Conductive Machete, you want to be playing cards like the Bear Trap, not the found footage. You'll still play it, but yes, the cards that this competes with are absurd. Here, I'll show you actually, because we'll be talking about this a lot. Sorry, I go through every card in the set before I review the cards. So the cards you have to compete with for milling are in green, Say Its Name, and Patchwork Beastie. I guess they don't mill. Reveal? No. How about put? I'm looking for the black card that you put a card into your hand. Commune with Evil. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest in your graveyard. You gain 3 life. This instantly does Delirium on 1 card. You don't have to. It doesn't matter if you don't have enchantment creatures or artifact creatures. And it gains 3 life to make up for the turn you just took off to do that. Plus, you don't have to show your opponent what that card is. Like, this found footage is a powerful card that has to compete with even more absurd cards. That's why it's at a 2. You'll still play it when you can. That's another reason for me to make it a 3. But yeah, it's fine. Yes, Manifest also mills a card. You don't need to put a ton of effort into making Delirium happen. So this is why Friendly Teddy is a 2/2. Like, it's a 2-mana 2/2 that each player draws a card. It's at parity. It's a fine 2/2. I don't like having 2/2s that 2-mana creatures or 3-mana creatures that trade with manifested creatures unless I really need that artifact, and sometimes you will really need this artifact. But you don't always. This card is not quite there. I gave it a 3, floor of a 2, ceiling of a 4. Giving your opponent a card when you aren't. So an important part of this set, in the shape of the format, is identifying who the beatdown is. Are your mana sinks better than your opponents? Are your late game spells better than your opponents? Are your engines better than your opponents? And if you can't be sure that the answer to that, all those questions, is yes, then the Friendly Teddy is a huge liability. It is a bear. It is a bear toy. It's a cool card, but the 2 drops we have in this set are so strong. So you might be able to build a deck where you are sure that that card is better for you than for them. A lot of the more aggressive decks, that's going to happen. But it's not going to be consistent enough that I'm willing to main deck this card. I'm actually going to be very happy to have it available in my sideboard in a lot of sealed decks. Like, if I have a deck that ends up having more bombs than my opponent, and then I know that, then I'll be happy to play this. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Glimmerlight. This card is so cool. This is a 2-mana 1/1 that brings an equipment with it. Glimmers are also a relevant type. Cards care that you have glimmers. Opponents' cards care that you don't have glimmers. Like, this is a 3-mana 2/2 or a 2-mana 1/1 that brings along an equipment. Equip 1 to give +1/+1 is always almost good enough. It's almost there every time. But this is the kind of artifact I want to be playing. I like this a lot. If they kill the 1/1, you still have the equipment left, and it's a relevant piece of equipment. It's one of the few ways at Artifact to grow your creatures. For instance, in your blue-black deck with Fear of Infinity, this is a good card. This is a cool piece of equipment that I'll be happy to play a few copies of in most of my decks. Yes, I actually didn't even notice that. It triggers Eerie because it makes the enchantment creature token. I did not factor that into my rating for this. That might be enough to make it a higher priority pick for some decks. But yes, this is an artifact that triggers Eerie, which on this scale, if you are, for instance, a black deck, and you care about Delirium and triggering Eerie, maybe you're a black-white deck, or maybe you're a red-black deck, then this might go up in priority for you. We're giving this one a revisit. I'll come back to it. Haunted Screen. Very cool piece of fixing. Very cool piece of ramp. It's 6 mana because it makes 1 mana for itself. But like, it gives you all 5 colors when you need. If you pay 7 mana to become a 7/7, then this is awesome. Like, this is a 6 mana 7/7. You can do this on your opponent's end step. You can only do it 1 time, but you can do it at instant speed. So if you're holding mana up, you can activate it. It is a little awkward in that it doesn't work with a lot of the other types, but Manolith is often close to being good enough. Like 3 mana at 1 minute of any color is almost there, but I love that this becomes a 7/7 in the late game. So I gave it a 5 with a floor of 3 and a ceiling of 6. I think it'll usually play near that ceiling of 6 because it's reasonable ramp that gives you a very good late game threat. Like it's a 7/7. It's really cool. It's expensive. The mana, like it's so cool, right? It's a black and white television. It's a black and white television. You can put some electricity in it, some energy into it, and it'll become a color television. And then the spirit comes out and kills you. I kind of wish this was a common because I would play this in Poppertron. I love it. All right, keys to the house. So this is also getting a revisit, but that's because I don't know how many good rare rooms there are. So 2 mana to go get a land is fine. It's good in the Delirium decks. So like if you're splashing for Delirium, putting an artifact into your graveyard in order to get a basic land to cast a Delirium spell is solid. It's not amazing. There are better ways to do it, but it's solid. It does its job. At common, there are quite a few rooms that give you that you net some mana on this. Like there's a 6 mana green room. Yes, exactly. So there's a 6 mana green room. It manifests dread, and then you put 3 counters onto it. So it makes a 5/5. So this lets you play the 3 mana half of the room, play keys to the house, and play the 5 mana half of the room or the 6 mana half of the room on the next turn. Or in the very late game, you can relock that 5/5 room and do it again. I'm giving this one a revisit as well because if you have this will go up a grade if you can really cheat a room. If there's like an 8 mana room or a 9 mana room at rare or mythic, I'll be playing this card. Huh. I didn't know that. Thank you, March. If you relock a room, it doesn't trigger Eerie. Okay, so if both doors are locked, it doesn't trigger Eerie. Can you proliferate room? Are they counters? I need to read rooms. No, it's not a counter. It just is a marker. The wizard gives you little unlock and lock counters, but they're not real counters. Yes, I saw the counters, the markers they give you. So I'm like, these might be counters, but you're right. Malevolent Chandelier, 6 mana, 4/4 flyer. It is graveyard hate. It's really expensive for graveyard hate. I will be happy to have access to this card out of my board. I can't see myself ever main decking it. I'm going to be mad when I pay 6 mana for a 4/4 flyer and my opponent disenchants it. But your opponent might be reliant enough on the graveyard that being able to tuck a card is good. There are control decks where you both want to deal with what your opponent has in the graveyard and want to draw your whole library and cycle through it again. But overall, this is not a card I'm going to be happy to play most of the time. Pick up a copy if you're playing best of 3 because it's a good sideboard card, and be aware of it in your pool for the pre-release. For your sealed deck, having access to this card out of the board might win you a game, but don't main deck it and don't pick it too high. Saw. This is a cool card. You can sacrifice your lands to draw cards. I love this. Sam Black is good at stalling out a game, so that makes sense, Satchmo. But Saw is a good way to stall out a game or is good in a stalled out game. It's tough because you do have to enable attacks. Chances are the way Saw will play once it's in play is it's going to be 2 mana to make your creature trade with one of the opposing creatures and draw a card. So like that is a 2 for 2. You sack a land, draw a card, you trade your creature for their creature. That's good in a lot of decks. It's not good in every deck. 2 mana is kind of a lot to equip for this kind of effect because it doesn't give any toughness. But if you're making tokens, if you need the sack outlet, it's pretty good. This is a very good red-black card. This is a very good blue-black card. Other than that, you're going to have to put some work into making it happen. I don't think it. So it's not great in Survivors. That's a really good question, Thane. So Survivor is the green white mechanic. Uh, it doesn't actually enable an attack you wouldn't have otherwise. Like if my 5/3 shrewd storyteller attacks with a saw on it, I'm going to sack my land to draw a card. But there's very few 3/3s that my opponent's not willing to trade off with the shrewd storyteller. And 2 mana is a little bit more than I want to spend to make that happen. Like if it gave +1/+1 or +2/+2, then it would be good in Survivor deck. But I think you have to want to sacrifice something. You have to have extra permanence to sacrifice for it to be good. It's negative tempo if you're just using it to enable your attacks. I do think this is a good card in general, but it's a black-red card or a blue-black card or a card for a deck with lots of extra tokens lying around. Which it might be. So we'll talk about this more as we get to other survivors. Some of the survivors make tokens as long as they're tapped. That's pretty good. All right. Up next, we've got the cycle of dual lands. We're on to lands. That was Saw was the last artifact. I I generally have these out of 4. I don't think these are worth speculating on. Like I don't think it's worth picking them. Like in other sets, I would take duels speculatively if I didn't need something out of the pack in case I opened a rare or something that aided the splash. Tapped lands are a liability in a format with built-in mana sinks. So if I have like a lot of rooms or equip costs or just random ways to spend mana for a little bit of value, then suddenly those tapped lands are a bit of a liability. That doesn't mean they're bad. It means I want to need these colors. Like, if I am a blue-white deck, I might not take the Abandoned Campground. If I am a blue-white-black deck and blue or white are my splash colors, then I want the Abandoned Campground. The thing that I don't know is if there's significant difference between the colors of the lands. So, like, in some sets, so unless the player has 13 less or less life, um, like that's pretty cool. If I'm losing really badly or winning really badly, then this is an untapped land. But like I don't know if the green white or red white more aggressive decks make this card worth it. Make this card stronger. So I gave them all a 4 with a floor of a 3 and a ceiling of 5. You want this when you want it. You don't want this when you don't want it. Um, don't pick them speculatively. There are good splashes, but you want to know what you're splashing for, why you're splashing in this set. Splashes are going to be worth it, but not free in this. I like it a lot. I think the way they play is pretty cool. I will take. You want these when they are your colors, to be clear. Like this is a 5 if I'm a blue-white deck, or a 5 if I'm splashing those colors. But I'm not going to splash the colors because I have the lands like in Dominaria United. And then last we have Terramorphic Expanse. Terramorphic Expanse is better in this set than it's ever been because you want lands in your graveyard. This is a quarter of your Delirium. You should take Terramorphic Expanse over these campgrounds almost every time. Yeah, getting any land out of your deck is great, and you will be incentivized to run some basic lands if you're splashing because a lot of what you're splashing with are basic land cyclers. And this puts a land into your graveyard. That's important. Like there are not good ways other than, for instance, manifesting dread or milling yourself to put lands into your graveyard. But let's rewind a bit. If we're looking at the found footage, not having to put a land into your graveyard with Surveil is pretty nice for your card types. That's fair, Spoon. Like this is a card you will pick pack 1 occasionally. It's tough. Like the good Delirium cards end up being so good, and there's enough. Like it's cool. I like how good Terramorphic Expanse is in this format. All right, we are going to take a 2-minute break, and then we'll move over to the white cards. Full disclosure, I didn't finish all of these panels other than green white because we're going to get more out of talking about them after we talk about white other than survival. All right, I will be right back. We'll do it like this. If you have questions, go ahead and ask questions. I will answer them all before I finish white. Two minutes. I just need to drink a ton of water. None of these feel right for what we're doing. This works. Be right back. Ask questions if you got them. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, I'm back. How we doing? We're finishing up this song because there's 10 seconds left. And you close my eyes for 10 seconds. Ugh, long work day. I'm here. Thank you. Okay. All right. So on to the white commons and uncommons. Same deal. I'll still be answering questions between slides. Um, I I always talk about the color pairs at the beginning of each color. We're going to talk about the color pairs. Green white survival we need to talk about here. It's relevant to a lot of how white plays. The rest of the color pairs we will talk about a little bit now, and then more when we get to each of those colors tomorrow. If you come back tomorrow at 7:30, it's probably going to be 8 because I have to work a little late. Um, we will do all the rest of the colors. And then Wednesday, we're doing early access. I will be drafting the entire day. All right. So up first, we have green white survival. In general, you need to prioritize your value survivors. That is cards that generate some amount of value worth more than 0 cards. So like you might be shrewd storyteller. A +1/+1 counter is a small amount of value, but some of them generate a whole card if the right setup. And that doesn't just mean so you need to generate value survivors in the cards that make those survivors valuable. Then you need combat tricks. And generally, combat tricks are just the best way to make sure your survivors survive a combat. Then you need your other survivors, and then you need the power cards. The cards that grant power or the cards that enable the attacks. You don't have to take removal quite as high in the survivor deck because your opponent has to block. And when your opponent has to block and you're protecting your creatures, combat tricks are as good as removal. You'll still need some removal, but it's just not as much of a priority as it is for the other white archetypes. Do your best to focus on enabling attacks. You can substitute removal combat tricks in for removal, and then focus on the size of your creatures. There's also enablers. You have to decide, like specific enablers, you have to decide how important those enablers are to your game plan. Because if you're attacking, stopping the attack to support an enabler is going to damage you in the long run. The enablers are really cool, and we'll look at a lot of them today. 8 Mountain Time. My time. Mountain Time. You listed all the ones that aren't my time. All right, red, white weenies. You got to do your payoffs first, then your anthems. Usually I'll put anthems at like 4 or 5 in terms of priority, but there's so few of them. There's so few cards that make all your creatures into relevant attackers. Then the removal. You do need more removal, a little bit higher in red, white. And then the weenies themselves. You're the only person who wants a lot of the red, white weenies, the cards that support Arabella, so you don't have to take them as high. Figure out what you're doing with the creatures and how you're winning. All right, Gremlin Tamer. So blue, white, Eerie. You want payoffs first, like Gremlin Tamer, the cards that care about the enchantments. There are a lot of enchantments available, so you need your cards that generate value from those enchantments first, then removal. Then you want to take protection for these creatures pretty high. There's some good ways to protect them. And then the enchantments themselves. There's so many enchantments, you won't have trouble getting them. You need to make sure you pick them, but you don't need to pick them too high. Just try to curve out and protect your creatures that are generating value from that. And then black-white reanimator. This is going to be a lot easier to talk about in terms of the black cards, so I didn't really flesh this section out. But you need your reanimation spells first, then the creatures that you're going to reanimate, then survivability. You need to make sure you stay alive. Fortunately, there's a lot of removal spells that you're the only deck who wants them. And then enablers. There's some cool enablers available because there's so many cards trying to get you to Delirium. But like Manifesting Dread is a great way to dump a big creature into your graveyard. And there's also a lot of land cycle creatures. Okay, our first card is Acrobatic Cheerleader. So this is like a quintessential survival card. It's a 2-mana 2/2. If it doesn't start flying, it's bad. You have to get this to fly. That could be because if you're on the play and you attack with a 2/2, that's a very good way to get it flying. There's a good chance that your opponent will block with their own 2/2 if they have one, which is fine. It's a 1-for-1. That's one of the reasons that I don't think this is an inherently aggressive deck. But Acrobatic Cheerleader is a great way to turn a combat trick into a kill spell, and then you have a 2-mana 2/2 flyer. It's a very good card in the survival deck. You can run it elsewhere as long as you have ways to enable it. And there are good ways to enable it. Cult Healer. 3-mana 3/3 that gains lifelink some amount of the time. It's solid. Like, you want to make sure that it has lifelink, but you don't need to make sure it has lifelink every turn for it to be a good card. I'm going to go ahead and lower the ceiling to a 4. But, like, if you can't give it lifelink very often, it's going to be a 3. This card's always going to be just fine. Emerge from the Cocoon. This is a reanimation bread and butter spell. It's great in reanimation. It's not really good elsewhere. You don't get a lot of value from it elsewhere. This one is splashable. This is a splashable reanimation spell. So if you have a strong blue-black deck that loots a lot, then you can play those strong creatures and splash and emerge from the cocoon. You'll be pretty happy. Floor of 2, ceiling of 7, fairly high difficulty. I'm actually lowering this to a 3 because, like, when you want it, you'll know, and you won't want it any of the rest of the time. That's funny. Yeah, the rare cards are cool. Ethereal Armor. So this card is better than it's been in a while. The downside to auras, historically in draft, has been that when you play an aura on the creature and then your opponent kills the creature, you are down 2 cards. It is a 2-for-1. However, a significant amount of the removal in this set is based on size. Way more than usual removal is based on size. So getting your creature sized up a little makes it a lot harder for them to kill it, which mitigates some of the risks that auras usually have. First Strike is very relevant in this format. Like, First Strike means that any survival creature you play this on is likely to get that attack in. And you can also mitigate some of the danger with eerie triggers for value. Like, you are less upset that your opponent 2-for-1 you after you hit them hard after you generated a 1/1 and drew a card from casting your enchantment. Very cool. Yes, this is a reprint from Return to Ravnica that we need. Like, this is a reprint into Standard, which is kind of awesome. And I like this card in general. Exercise. This is just good. Like, every deck has targets for this. Artifact, enchantment, and creature with power 4 or greater means you hit most cards you care about. Yes, this is a really good point, Thane. If this doesn't enter, you don't get the eerie trigger. So you have to make sure your opponent can't kill your creature in response. Like, there is some planning to playing with Ethereal Armor. Exercise, powerful removal, hits a lot of stuff. Exiling is better than destroying by a wide margin in this set. This is just really good removal in Duskmourn. This is the other 7 uncommon I've rated so far. This card is even better than it would be in most sets. So it takes out it exiles your own creature, and it exiles your opponent's creature. And then when it leaves, you get them back. So the thing about Fear of Abduction is, let's break it down a little bit. When a lot of the time, this style of card is dangerous when your opponent has lots of enters the battlefield effects. This is not a set with a lot of enters the battlefield effects, but there's enough of them that you are likely to both hit your opponent's big threat and blink a relevant creature of your own. If you manifest a card, if you manifest Dread, you can manifest Dread on an instant and use that as a cost, and then you'll get that instant back. You wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. It is multiple types. It is a good reanimation target. It blinks relevant things. It takes out blockers. It does everything you need it to do. Very powerful card. Very low risk card. I know I don't like paying a lot of mana for enchantment creatures, but if your opponent kills this, then you are likely to get more value out of them killing this than they are. And it's a 5/5 flyer. Like, this is a real threat. This ends the game in 4 turns if they're at 20 life. They have to kill this. Yeah, this is a good card. Like, this is a card that is castable and that you are happy to reanimate with Emerge from the Cocoon or loot away, which we'll talk about in a second, and then reanimate. Very cool. All right, up next we have Fear of Immobility. This would have a lower rating in other sets, but there's not a lot of competition for 5-drops in white. There's very few 5-mana spells, 5-mana strong creatures in general. Which in the past few sets, I have said this would have a higher rating, but there's a ton of competition. No, that's not the case. There are not very many 5-mana threats, but this is a 5-mana threat with that is an enchantment that stuns an opposing creature or that enables your own creature's survival. So it's always like fine, but it has a place. It has something interesting to do in every deck. It's 2 creature types for Delirium. It taps your own creature for survival. It taps your opponent's creatures when you're attacking. You would rather tap your opponent's creature if you have survival. Just kind of a solid threat all around. Up next, we have Fear of Surveillance. This one's got it getting revisit because a 2-mana 2/2 does not get to attack for free. Like, having 2 types is solid. It's a reasonable card. Surveilling on attack is awesome. But attacking is not free on the Fear of Surveillance. However, it does slot pretty nicely into the survival decks. Like, its slot is good in these same situations because it responds to combat tricks the same way. But I did give it a revisit. We'll have to see how it plays. I gave it a 4 with a floor of 4, and it'll usually play near that floor of 4. Sometimes you're going to be willing to just sacrifice this creature to get that attack in to surveil a large creature in your graveyard. Like, you could surveil the Fear of Abduction in your graveyard and then reanimate it. At first, I was like, oh, not a lot of people died due to a Fear of Surveillance, but then I saw the souls down here. I guess the level of the fear has to matter because lots of people were a little afraid of a fear of... Lots of people had a little bit of fear of surveillance, and a few people had a massive fear of abduction. Interesting. Up next, Friendly Ghost. I reevaluated this one a lot. So, like, it's almost off. Like, +2/+4 is a massive buff. It means that whatever you have that you need to attack with, like a Fear of Surveillance, is going to get in and hit reasonably hard. Your opponent's not going to be able to block it very well. But being, like, I looked at this card and I gave it a 3, and then I'm like, this turns on all of my survival attacks. And then I'm like, this has 2 power, which Boros cares about. This flying is pretty weak. We're going to bump it up again. I want to blink this. I want to reanimate this. I want to, like, it's one of the more powerful cards that you can seek with cards that care about creatures with power 2 or less. It is better. It will play better than it looks. I like it a lot. If it had flash, this would be a 7. Oh my god. Oh, so in this set, the faces, the spirits it drags with it, are things it killed. I learned that from Haiku. Yeah, Haiku told me that. So these are victims of the Fear of Surveillance, and these are victims of the Fear of Abduction. But Fear of Abduction has fewer faces than the Fear of Surveillance. So I have to assume that the power of the fear matters too. So lots of things fear surveillance. Like, we all fear surveillance a little bit, but we also aren't crippled by a fear of surveillance. But if you fear abduction, you're not leaving your house. So that's my theory. Like, the amount of fear matters. You could have one person who really fears spiders and then makes a more powerful spider than all of this fear of surveillance. Cool card. Like, this one has levels to it, and I came up in increments a few times. All right, up next we have Glimmer Seeker. This is one of the more powerful and important survival creatures. The 3-mana 3/3, like, that's almost good enough. That's a very good body on the vanilla test. The first time it survives, you make a 1/1. That's value. The second time it survives, you draw a card. So the first time it survives, you get a half a card worth of creature. And the second time it survives, you get a whole card worth of survival. And if you have Glimmers pre-made, maybe because you have an equipment that makes this harder to block, then you're very happy with it in general. So I gave it a 6 with a floor of a 5 and a ceiling of 7. It'll usually play somewhere between those, but this is one of your more important survivors for the survival deck because it generates a whole card worth of value. It means that every time you spend a combat trick to make sure that this breaks through, you get to refund that card. That's very true, Shy. It is really easy not to leave your house. Yeah, so Carl, all of Duskmourn is one house. The whole world is a house. All right, up next is our first white room. It's the common room. Sorry, I know you have to crane your head. But 2 mana for a 1/1 is bad. However, it is 2 enchantments for 1 card. 3 mana for 2 power is bad. But it's also an eerie trigger. So these are an enchantment, a room, an unlock, 2 counters for 5 mana. All of that is bad, but you can pull additional value out of all of it. This is better if you are enabling a survival attack and an eerie trigger. This is better if you are enabling 2 eerie triggers plus a third one when you unlock it. Like, I gave it a 3 average, but in the right deck, it's a 6. It's a lot of work to get there, but if you're in, it unites so many small mechanics and small bits of value. Like, it is a card made of small bits of value. So you have to get those to add up. But don't pay 2 mana, don't pay 5 mana for a 2/2. Like, don't play a 2 mana 1/1 that then gets 1 counter. You need to have other creatures to get the full value. You need to have eerie triggers. You need to have survival triggers. This is a good enabler for all of those. Cool card, fantastic design. Only works in the when you put the work into it. It's not that this card works in a specific deck. It works with specific cards that you want anyway. Right. You only curve into it if you have the 1-drop. So yes, it curves into itself, Galgron. It's a good point because it's a 2 mana 1/1 and then 3 mana to put a counter on it. But like, you don't want to pay 5 mana for a 2/2 that leaves an enchantment around. You want to pay 2 mana for a 1/1. Like, 5 mana, if we break it down a little, like, let's say we do have a 1-drop, right? Not a survival, just a 1 mana 1/1, sure. Then we have a 1 mana 1/1, and then a 2 mana 1/1, and then a 3 mana to put a counter on each of them. We just paid 5 mana for a 3/3, full stop. 5 mana for a 3/3, like, worth of power, that's not good enough. You need to be paying 5 mana for a 3/3 is a 1. But if you have the 1-drop that you're enabling the survival trigger on, or if you played a Gremlin Tamer, like, you get to make, like, if you have a Gremlin Tamer turn 2 and then turn 3, you play your 2 mana 1/1 that is 2 enchantments, that makes 2 1/1s, that then makes another 1/1 and puts 2 more counters on it. That compounds really fast. I didn't give this a low score because it's unplayable. I gave this a low score because you want to have those cards already. Don't take this until you have your eerie and survival triggers. It's really cool, but it's work. It's not a free card. I love it. I love this design. I think it's so cool. All right. Up next, Hardened Escort. This card enables your survival creature. Like, you get to give your Glimmer Seeker +1/+0 and indestructible. Benny, thanks so much for the follow. I have the notifications off because we're doing this right now. But this enables your survival triggers on top of a reasonable body. Like, stat-wise, this is a 3 mana 3/4. It gives another creature indestructible. This is really strong. And it stretches your combat tricks. Like, if you have, we'll talk about, all right, we're going to jump ahead a little bit. All right, because our next card is Jump Scare. So if I have a survival creature like Glimmer Seeker and a Hardened Escort, and they have a 4/4, then Jump Scare saves my Hardened Escort, and I don't have to worry about the Glimmer Seeker, and I get that survival trigger. So this is a card that enables your survival, but it's also just a good attacker. Like, it's a 2-power creature, so you want to play it in Boros. You want to play it in, you want this badly in both Boros and Survival, in Boros and Selesnya. But you're not going to be upset enabling the other small things in blue-white or blue-white-black or white-black, because it blocks really well too. Like, good set of stats, solid card. We got you with the Jump Scare. Whenever you unlock this door, create a 1/1 white. No, it's 2 triggers for Eerie. This one is 2 triggers for Eerie Haiku because it makes a 1/1 enchantment creature token. Yeah. Oh, very scary card. This card is better. Like, this card is good on its own, but it's better due to a lack of combat tricks. There are very few combat tricks in this set. +2/+2 and flying is great because you can use it as a surprise to win a combat. Or if it's not going to win you the combat, you can just give the creature flying so that they can't block it. You can use it offensively, you can use it defensively to jump up into the air and block. Just a solid card. Becoming an enchantment is a liability. In a pinch, you can use it to turn your opponent's creature into an enchantment and then exile target enchantment. You unlock it when you cast it, though. So when you cast the Grand Entryway, it counts as one trigger because the Grand Entryway comes into play and triggers the Eerie. And then the 1/1 it makes when it comes into play also triggers Eerie. So you get 2 Eerie triggers. Unless it says... I just realized I need to read Eerie and make sure it doesn't say once each turn. I don't think Eerie says once each turn. No, it doesn't. Okay. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, create a 1/1 gremlin creature token. Entering is one trigger, the glimmer is another, and then fully unlocking it is when you unlock the rotunda. All right, up next, Lionheart Glimmer. So this would be weaker in other sets. In this set, it's the only real. There's not very many anthems. Anthems are a rarity in this set, and the ward is nice. Like it's a low risk anthem creature, so it's a 4 in a lot of sets, but it's great in blue white enchantments. It's a 6 in blue white enchantments. It's a 6 in red white tokens. It's a 4 in black white and green white, but it's a cool card. Right, it gives the bonus the turn it comes down. Like, you can cast this, attack with other things. It's not whenever the Lionheart Glimmer attacks. It's whenever you attack, period. Cool card. I gave it a 5 with a ceiling of 6 and a floor of 4. It's a 6 in 2 of the decks. It's a 4 in 2 of the deck. Living Phone. I came back and changed this one a lot. Like, this is not... If this were 3 mana, 2/1 artifact creature that drew a card when it died, it would be good. It's not. It is not guaranteed to die. Your opponent can exile this. There's a few good ways to do it. You aren't guaranteed to hit with this. You have a real shot at whiffing with this card. You can build around this and still whiff with it. But it's fine. Like, this is a format where this is a 3-man... Like, this is a 3-man 2/1 that is likely to trade with a manifest creature, but if your opponent has a 2/3, it just sits there. And it is good if it digs you for something powerful, a specific rare or a card you need, but it's not guaranteed to do that, which is why I gave it a 3. It's usually going to play close to that floor of a 3. It'll play at that ceiling of a 4 or even a 5. So if the rares with 2 power are very strong, I haven't looked at the rares yet, that ceiling will go up. I don't know what this is a reference to specifically. Yeah, like, this is a 3/6 on attack. It's a 3/6 anthem on attack. I like the Glimmer. Optimistic Scavenger. This is the best card in an Eerie deck in white. It's weak elsewhere. Like, if you're triggering this enough, it's fantastic. It is one of the best, scariest starts you can have in this format. Is turn 1 Optimistic Scavenger, turn 2 Grand Entryway, put 2 counters down. Turn 3 unlock the Rotunda, put 3 counters down. Like, that floor of a 4 is if you only have a few enchantments. If this is a 2/2 or a 3/3, it's really pretty good. If this is throwing counters out all over, it's going to win you the game. Very powerful, bread and butter Eerie card. If you get past these, you should know that the Eerie deck is available. I gave it a 6, floor of 4, ceiling of 7. Orphans of the Wheat. So you are not likely to have enough untapped creatures to make this deal more damage than the untapped creatures would do on attack. But you can sacrifice this creature to trigger a bunch of survival triggers. I think this art is a reference to Souls of the Lost. Julie Dillon. No, wait, not Souls of the Lost. Souls of the Faultless. This one. Nope, never mind. Just got the same vibes. Orphans of the Wheat, it's a survival card. It doesn't have enough relevant types to be good elsewhere, but it's very good in this. It is Children of the Corn reference. I was just wondering if it was the same artist as Souls of the Lost. It is not. Um, but yes, this is the Children of the Corn reference. And it is a survival trigger specifically. It's a survival enabler. It's not a bad one either at a 2-mana 2/1, but like this is a high cost. You don't want to tap 6/2/2s to attack for 8, right? Like you want to actively be enabling your survival. I'm lowering this to a 3, the floor, but it'll usually play at a 5. It's good in the survival deck. That's too high a ceiling. I think I'm lowering all of these numbers by 1. Like, yeah, this is only really good in the survival deck. It's not good enough if you don't care about triggering survival. Up next is Patched Plaything. This one I meant to up, so we just swapped those ratings because I looked at more of the set. Like a 3-mana 2/1 with Double Strike is solid but fragile. But this is a good reanimation target, and there's a few ways to reanimate a creature with mana value 3 or less. And it has more relevant typing. It's solid. If every point you can grow it is great. There's a lot of good ways to grow your creature. If Scuffle, so we did have somebody make a magic card of me a while back for Commander. It's in links. All right, Possessed Goat. This card is only good in black white. Like a 4-mana 4/4 is cool. It's pretty good, especially spread out over 2 turns. But you want to make sure you're actually discarding. Like it's 2 cards, right? This is a 1-mana 1/1. A 1-mana 1/1 is not good enough by itself, but there are decks that actively want you to discard cards. So if this is a 1-mana 1/1 that is a 4/4 on turn 3 that discards a giant creature, you can then reanimate it. It's really good. This is a fantastic way to enable Reanimator on a good attacker and blocker. Bad everywhere else. Right. This what a goat indeed. Yes. So it's only it's a 4/3 double strike if you can reanimate. There's a room that returns a creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to play. Really good with Patch Plaything. Yeah. Goat is a goat in Reanimator. It's a 5 in Reanimator, a 3 everywhere else. Like maybe there's some Delirium stuff you want to enable, but you really want to be using this to enable your Reanimator cards. All right. Savior of the Small. This is a great card. It's a combo with Patched Plaything. But this is the kind of survival card I'm talking about when you want to pull a whole card of value out of your survivor. It is a really, like, you want to put effort into enabling the survival trigger, but it's a really good one if you can do it. There's a lot of creatures that you want to pick up with it that are incredibly powerful. Red-white archetype is 2 power or less foos, but it's not worth it. It's not worth running the creatures that have 2 power or less for your red-white archetype, because there's so many that are good enough on face value, right? Like you don't have to play weaker cards to enable your 2 power or less strategies. Great question. Also, hello. How's it going? It's been a bit. Good to see you. All right, up next, Seize from Slumber. 5 mana, destroy target creature is fine. You'll play it when you have to. You're not going to be happy about it, but targeting a tapped creature is relevant. You want it the most in the defensive white decks, which is mostly black-white. You could play it in blue-white, not be too upset. It's going to feel really weak in red-white or green-white. But you'll curve into this and play it on turn 5 and not be too upset. You'll play curve in, like, and if you're a defensive speed deck killing attackers, you're happy. Solid card. So it's a floor of a 3 in the really aggressive decks, ceiling of 6 in the decks that want to buy time with it. I will splash for Savior based on what I have to reanimate. So this is a great question. If I have some Abhorrent Oculuses, I'll splash for Savior. It's more about the creatures that I have to pick up with the Savior than the Savior itself. I'm not going to splash for Savior to pick up a 2-mana 2/2. I'll splash for Savior to pick up a 3-mana 5/5. Shard Mage's Rescue. This card is uniquely good in this format. Triggering Eerie at instant speed, protecting your key creatures is important. Like, this is Snakeskin Veil with upside in the typing. It's good for Delirium, it's good for Eerie, it's good for keeping your key creatures alive, and with all the engines, there's a lot of key creatures. So this is a great trick and powerful spell in this format. It's going really well, Tyron. This set is awesome. The flavor isn't there for me, but the mechanics and the gameplay is for sure. Also, I came up with something like I've got a scale of enchantment to graveyard that I think is gonna be something other content creators figure out eventually. All right, up next, Sheltered by Ghosts, and this is an incredibly powerful and very fragile removal spell. So, Lifelink is really good. Ward 2 is really good. If your opponent kills the creature in response, nothing happens. If you're racing or aggressive, this card is really good. If your opponent kills your opponent gets their creature back when they kill the creature that this is on. This is a high effort value, both because you have to build your deck right to play with it, and you have to play carefully with it. When this is good, it wins you the game outright. When this is bad, it's going to be why you lost. So pay attention and play with it carefully. Yes, it hits non-land permanents. I mean, that's not inaccurate. Like, it's a delayed cost, right? Like, if you play this on turn 2, your opponent probably can't kill it until turn 4, but then they get a 2-for-1. It's very cool. If you're aggressive, you want this card. Like, the aggressive decks will win with this card, and it's going to feel awful. And sometimes your opponent is going to play 3 copies of this on the same creature, and you're going to be really mad about it. You're going to be so upset. Ooh, yes, this is true, Trannel. Thank you. It's a great point. You're not, if you don't cast a room, if you blink a room, then neither side is unlocked. This is a really cool card. You will play with it. You have to be really conscious of how you're picking this card and how you're playing with this card. If your opponent is on removal.deck, you'll lose as a result of playing this. Like, letting your opponent, there's just a lot of cards that you don't want to give your opponent an extra ETB on. But, like, the thing is, buying time in this format can equate to buying cards. Like, if I have Glimmer Seeker in play, and I play this on my Glimmer Seeker, yes, they will kill this Glimmer Seeker eventually and get their card back, but it's going to be after I drew 2 cards as a result of taking out their creature for 2 mana. It also gets better the more protection you have. Like, if I have 3 Shard Mage's Rescue, then I'm a lot more willing to play 3 Sheltered by Ghosts. You just have to play carefully. It's a really cool card, and I love the design on it. I love the feel of it. But it's not free. It's not the instant game-winning spell it appears to be. And you're going to have situations where your opponent kills you with this because you don't hit your 4th land, and then you're going to draft it really high and run 3 copies of it, and you'll lose every time, and it's going to feel really bad. Just don't put all your eggs into this basket. Yes. I don't think that's so. Uncommons are now like 5 per pack, Algron. There are more uncommons in Duskmourn than commons. You will see more uncommons in any given draft than commons. And you will... What that means... This is actually good to talk about. I should have talked about it at the beginning. Commons now are cards that you can get more reliably. You can get multiple copies of them, and you can craft a game plan around them. Uncommons, you will see more total uncommons, but since there are more uncommons than commons, you will see more different uncommons. But yeah, cool card. It's going to be super fun to play with. If you have 2 copies of Sheltered by Ghosts and then a Shard Mage's Rescue, and your opponent pays Ward 4, and then you Shard Mage's Rescue, they're gonna scoop. All right, up next, Shepherding Spirits. This card is great in Reanimator. It's okay if you are splashing, but like paying 2 mana to Plane Cyclist and then reanimating a 4/5 flyer is gonna feel really good. Um, it's weird for splashing. Most of the land cyclers have double pips, so they're hard to splash that color, but they do enable some 3-color builds. Cool card. It's going to be a 2 in a lot of decks. I'm going to raise that floor to a 3. But that ceiling of 6 is in the Reanimator. It's also castable. Like, you will have reanimation games where you do just get to cast these cards, and a 4/5 flying body is real. It survives most spells, and it kills, like, it's a real clock in the air. All right, up next we have Split Skin Doll. So this is one of the cards that, when I say the power 2 or less matters archetype isn't as aggressive, this is one of the cards that's why. Like, this is a 2-mana 2/1, draw a card. That's great. This is a 2-mana 2/1 that loots. That's pretty good, because breaking down the archetypes, you have, so blue white and blue red, or red white and blue white. Red white will almost always be able to draw a card. Blue white will usually be able to draw a card. Black white wants this to discard. Black white wants to play this on turn 2 and discard something to reanimate. And then green white is where this is weakest. Like, it is still likely to draw you a card in green white, but you're much more interested in enabling attacks than spending your turn drawing cards. It's still solid in those decks, but it's not going to feel amazing. It's crazy that a 2-mana 2/1 draw a card is only a 5, but that's where we are. That's Modern Magic. Yes, I think weenies will get a lot out of splashing black. Red-white weenies will splash black really effectively. They're great at generating value from the creatures. Up next, Surgical Suite. So this is, it reanimates a creature with mana value 3 or less. Like, you can turn to Split Skin Doll and discard a Patch Plaything, and then reanimate the Patch Plaything. It'll be a 4/3 with double strike. The nice thing about this card is, if we look at this effect in the past, things like Recommission or Helping Hand, the danger of cards like Recommission and Helping Hand, great question, Bulldozer. We'll talk about it in a second. So the danger of cards like Recommission and Helping Hand is that they get stuck without a target in your hand. Or Hospital Room. Like, having a Hospital Room right after your opponent wipes your board sucks. So this split card is really good together. Like, compared to a lot of the other doors, rather than unlocking these doors, the other half, when you have time, you get to hold the door and unlock it when it's strong for you. You get to unlock it when it's best. So the delay on unlocking these doors actually holds a lot of value for you. This is a really cool room. Reanimating and growing a creature on attack is just a nice set of effects. I gave it a 5. I'm going to go ahead and raise the floor, but I think 5 is pretty accurate. Ceiling of 6, floor of 4. All right, so Split Skin Doll. How does this card compare to Raffine's Informant? Favorably. So, like, Raffine's Informant, Raffine's Informant is a 2-mana 2/1 Connive. It was incredibly powerful in Streets of New Capenna. Streets of New Capenna overall was a weaker set. So Raffine's Informant was better relative to everything else. Raffine's Informant, you weren't likely to use the card you discarded to the graveyard. You weren't trying to put things into the graveyard. So if we compare discarding a land on your Connive to discarding a card to drawing the card here, I think that's pretty accurate in terms of the power level of that set. Then you had a 2-mana 2/1 draw card, or a 2-mana 3/2 because you discarded a real card. This one you have a little more control over whether you net a card from it or not. Like, a 2/1 body is less relevant in this set than a 3/2 body was in Streets of New Capenna. But better in general. Like, this card has a lot going for it. But I do, like, Raffine's Informant was a 5 or a 6 in Streets of New Capenna. And that's because the whole set was worse and all the white cards were better. So it is difficult to compare cards to Streets of New Capenna in general, because that format was so imbalanced. In terms of balance, we're going to see a lot of green decks overperforming in the early days. I think we're going to start seeing everything else surpass green as the format goes on. Green lacks green has so much raw power compared to the other color combinations, but lacks a lot of the synergies we're seeing in other color combinations. And the removal is a lot worse. Trapped in the Screen, not a lot to say about it. It is a solid removal spell. Ward 2 is going to be incredibly valuable in a set full of cheap disenchants, and it triggers Eerie. Uh, just a good removal spell that you want in white. The problem, like, you can't count on this for an Eerie deck because people will want it in other colors, and it's easy to splash. But just good removal. Take it high in white. 3 cards left. Unsettling Twins. This is the kind of card you want in your Boros Power 2 or less deck. Is the kind of card that you want to blink and hit with your, where are you? Fear of Abduction. Like, Fear of Abduction is really good with this card. We're past the point where 4 mana for 2/2/2s is inherently good. But it's 4 mana for 2/2/2s, and you can flip one up, or reanimate this creature, or blink this creature. Very cool in general. Hey, Troy, good to see you, buddy. Caught us right at the end, but that's okay. Unwanted Remake. So, this card is bad to play on your opponent's creature. Letting your opponent manifest Dread, unless they have a crazy bomb, is going to feel bad pretty much every time. It is often going to be worth playing on your own creature. Putting a Manifesting Dread at instant speed is excellent. Manifesting Dread on yourself and putting a creature and a land and an instant into your graveyard at the same time is going to be good in a lot of decks. But white doesn't have a lot of Delirium or cards that care about the graveyard. So that's why it's a 2. Like, this card has a place in this format because, so don't play this on your opponent's creature. Manifesting Dread is so powerful that you don't want your opponent to be able to do it. But it's also so powerful that you're willing to sacrifice a creature to do it. So it will play at a 4 in some decks because you will, when you have the ability to generate value by unwanted remaking your own creature, then it is okay to have access to this card to play on your opponent's bombs. But don't play it if you're not going to hit your own creatures with it. Like, if you've got free glimmers, or you want to put 3 relevant cards in your graveyard at once and make a 2/2, then it's fine. Yes. If you pay 1 more mana, you can do it without it costing you a creature. So you only want this card when you want to have the creature that you're targeting in your graveyard actively. That's why it's a 2. It's not a good card, but I like that it has a place. Like, this card will see some amount of play hitting your own creatures with it. I love that. Up next, Veteran Survivor. It's a 1 mana 2/1. This is the last card of the night. 1 mana 2/1. It's not great. Like, a 1 mana 2/1 is good in a format when your opponent can't deploy 2 mana 3 toughness creatures. There's a lot of 2 mana 3 toughness creatures. You also, this is very likely to have a survival trigger on turn 2, but not very likely to actually have a target. However, exiling cards from the graveyard is so rare in this format. Like, there are so few ways at common or uncommon to exile your cards from a graveyard that this box of text is relevant. So in the survival deck, you're going to play this just to attack your opponent's Delirium. But you're not going to be able to attack with the Veteran Survivor. You're going to need to find ways to get this tapped to enable it on your own. That's why it's a high effort. Yeah, there's a few ways Wing Spear, but none of them are easy. So hang on, we'll go through them really quick. Fear of Immobility. It's a 5 mana 4/4. You can tap your own creatures. Friendly Ghost enables an attack. I count that one. Hardened Escort enables an attack. I count that one. All combat tricks I count. This one especially because your opponent can't block with the 3/3. And then Orphans of the Wheat I count. So, like, it's a weak card, but you want it in the dedicated survival deck, but not in, like, It's nice because it lets you switch gears a little. Like you can be a mid-range or controlling survival deck with veteran survivor, but if you play on turn 1, you're an aggressive survival deck. But it's only good in the survival deck. That is, yeah. So there's 2 rare vehicles and there's a lot of actual green enablers, which we'll talk about when we do green tomorrow. So that is all we're doing for today. We did the introduction, the overview, and now I'm lightheaded. Tomorrow we're going to do the other 4 colors, if at all, if I am at all able. If I can't finish all 4 colors tomorrow, we will finish them Wednesday morning before early access. But just so everybody knows the schedule. I don't know why I just got a big emote explosion. Did somebody follow me and I not get the notification? If so, thank you. And I'll do a more specific thank you shortly. All right, so tomorrow is part 2 of the review. We're going to try and finish all the rest of the commons and uncommons, the other 4 colors. We'll go very fast because we have all 4 sets. Right. It won't get their cards on turn 1 on Satchmo. But it gets to attack on turn 1 as a 2/1 or on turn 2. But all right, Wednesday 10 a.m. we are doing the Duskmorn early access streamer event. I will finish the set review that night. If I can't finish it tomorrow, I will do my best to finish it tomorrow. But I am out of energy tonight, so I work tomorrow until 5, so I'll see what I can do. All right, but that's going to be it for tonight. Tomorrow we're going to finish part 2 of the set review, and I will have this up in the morning. I say morning, probably noonish is when it usually finishes uploading to YouTube. You can watch it there. And then tomorrow night we'll finish set review. Wednesday at 10 a.m. we're doing Duskmorn early access. I'm leaving on Thursday to go to Ohio for the barbecue, which is a cube event. I have won the last 3 times. I'm going to try and win it 1 more, make it 4 in a row. And then Monday after that, so I'm not going to have much time to stream next week, but I will try and do what I can from Ohio. So I can play some with the new set during the day while I'm there. Why don't we go see Isaiah? It looks like he's doing a rare version of the set review. Or we could go see Spout. He's doing Portal. We'll go see Isaiah. Cincinnati, Ohio is the is where the barbecue is. A bunch of my friends, 20, 40-ish of us all put in a few $100s and we rent a big mansion. Me too. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. All right, we're gonna go see Isaiah. I will see everybody tomorrow at 7:30. It might be 8. I'll let people know in the morning for the rest of this set review. And if you are interested, if this doesn't make you better at drafting this set, I will refund